My name is Dave Hollenbach, the host of From Embers to Excellence, a podcast that explores the many facets of leadership from the perspectives of some amazing people. We discuss the triumphs and failures that have shaped our lives and our leadership philosophies. I've found that it isn't whether we fail that defines us, but when we do fail, how we respond. Leaders dust off the ashes and use their failures as fuel to work harder and as lessons to come back wiser and stronger, more resilient, more determined, and more committed to excellence. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Ed Slover. He is the author of Q.U.E.S.T, Navigating the Journey Through Life and Business. He is a business consultant, certified transformation life coach, certified resilience practitioner, host of the Quest for Life podcast, and founder of Q.U.E.S.T Consulting Service, LLC. We're going to get to know a little bit about Dr. Slover today, talk about his Q.U.E.S.T model. Q.U.E.S.T is an acronym, and we'll dig into what that means. And really, I've been looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to talking about your background and what you're most passionate about. I just had the privilege of being interviewed by you on your podcast. So thank you very much for that. But thank you so much for coming on and allowing me to have this conversation with you today.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's dig into where it all began. Where were you born and raised, and what was your early life like?
I'm a Midwestern boy, so I was born and raised in Southwest Ohio. I had a pretty average childhood growing up. It was a family of five, very traditional, upbringing in the sense that my dad was the primary breadwinner. My mom was home every day after school for my sisters, and I have two older sisters. And everything about my upbringing was really just kind of nondescript. I mean, there wasn't anything I would say special about it. It was a different time, though, because we'd get up in the summer times, we'd do our chores, and my mother would say, "Hey, I don't want to see you till dinner." So we would go outside and play. We would, go around the neighborhood, and then after dinner, we'd go out and play until the street lights came on. So it's certainly a different time. And unfortunately, whenever I was 13, my dad passed away. He was 39. He died of pancreatic cancer, which we learned at the time is rare in anybody under 70. And we had found out in May of 1987. He died in August. And as you might expect, that had a profound impact on the lives of my mom, my sisters, and certainly myself. And then my teenage years, especially my late teenage years, I was just mad at everything. I was mad at the world. I was mad at God. I was just angry, and ended up being estranged from one of my sisters. And in my early 20s, I ended up asking her, I'm like, why don't we have a relationship? And she said something that ultimately was a light bulb moment for me. She's like, "You're a jerk." And it was, and Dave, you know this, in life, we need people to help pull stuff out of our blind spots. And in that moment, my sister pulled that out of my blind spot. And it was absolutely not only a wake-up call for me wanting to have a relationship with her, but it really shifted my mindset and my worldview of how I interacted and treated others. And it was the first time, I think, in my life, so early to mid 20s, where I stopped blaming everything that was external to me. Now, there's no doubt that there are things in life that happen to us. There's no doubt about those things, but a larger percentage, at least from my experience, a larger percentage are those things that are in many ways self-imposed. Yeah. And I was compromising the integrity of relationships at a younger age because of me, rather than anything that they were doing. So Um, my dad's death has impacted really from then until now in ways that are really hard to quantify, because I would give my left arm to have a dinner with him, but also knowing that had he lived, I would be dramatically different. So um, it was nondescript up until that point, and then everything shifted from there.
Yeah. Did you go right into college after high school?
I did. I had an interesting experience. So when I was a senior in high school, my last couple of quarters, I had already completed all of the academic requirements. I was an average high school student, and I pretty much slept in every class, especially seventh period. And I was literally a month away from graduation and didn't have any college plans. The college was aspirational, thinking, okay, I'll get to it at some point, but I need to get into the workforce. I'll need to pay for it myself. And I get a call over the loudspeaker, get a call from the guidance counselor to come see me, or rephrase, for me to come see her. And I, as I was waking up, because I was asleep in class. As I was waking up, I made my way down, and it turned out that there was a former founder of a real estate company that oversaw a trust fund to help, quote, hardworking students. And I don't know if I would have fit into that. But quote, working students get to school with a couple of qualifiers. So I had to live at home. I had to work 30 hours a week. And if I did that, then my tuition and books, this was when we still had hard books, would be paid for. And it was a complete blessing, totally unexpected. And it allowed me to go to school straight out of college. And I was on the 5-year plan. I was able to successfully navigate that. But it really wasn't until my third semester of college that I figured this learning thing out. I originally was a secondary education major, and that wasn't blowing my hair back. And then I started getting curious about learning, and ever since then, so for the better part of 30 years, ever since then, I've just got a voracious appetite for information and knowledge, even those things that conflict with my belief systems, knowing that I don't have to adopt them or advocate for them. But my mindset is really, just trying to become a more well-rounded person and get a better understanding, to the extent that I can understand things that are separate from my own thoughts, ideas, and perspectives.
When you were talking about losing your father and how that really impacted your life and the life of your mother and your siblings, you were 13 years old, so you had another 5 years of school. And I would imagine, you didn't just piss off your sister, you probably, really irritated your teachers, maybe other students, who knows? Like I know that attitude. When I lost my brother, I got really angry with the world as well. And I think that I pushed a lot of people to the periphery. And um, you know, I'm curious as to who, maybe was it a teacher, a coach, or your mother, that really became the main role model for you, that shaped your attitude and your work ethic when you went to college?
uh, so let me talk about my mother real quick. Um, my mother, in dealing with the time period once we found out my dad was sick, and he deteriorated very, very quickly. I mean, in 3 months from the time we found out he was sick. And in the year or two subsequent to his death, the the word I would use to describe her is grace. There's no guidebook to this thing called life. There's no guidebook to parenting. There's certainly no guidebook to dealing with a terminally ill spouse. And when you have three teenage kids, there's no guide. I mean, what does that look like? What do you do with that? And how she handled it was, she handled it with unimaginable grace. And I couldn't have just been more thankful for her willingness to sit with us and work through grief. Despite whatever pain she was going through herself, she allowed us to work through that process. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Kubler-Ross model of the 5 stages of grief. One of the things that when people look at that model, they think it's a linear progression that you go from denial to acceptance, and then there are these pit stops along the way. And it really needs to be viewed, rather than this linear progression, as a continuum. Now, there was no denying that my dad was gone, so I didn't have to live in that space anymore. But I was absolutely toggling back and forth between depression and anger for a period of time. And after about a year and a half, my mom decided to have a life. And she was married right out of high school. She was 18 years old. And her family was her life up until my dad's passing. And so she ended up getting a job that she really, really enjoyed. She started dating again. And both of my sisters had moved out at the time, so I became a latchkey kid. And Dave, I don't know. I don't know why this teenage boy never did anything to get in trouble. I had every opportunity to get involved in all sorts of messes. And I figured out a way to get homework done. I figured out a way to get to school the next day. I figured out how to iron clothing and to do laundry and to heat up Hot Pockets. And I just figured it out. And I think so early influence post my dad passing, my mother was instrumental in that. And she and I had some stuff to work through in my late teens and early 20s, because when she sort of reintegrated into my life, she wanted to be my parent, and she was trying to parent me the same way she did whenever I was younger. And we had to have this out to say, look, I told her this. I'm like, you forfeited the right to be that type of parent. The relationship has to change. I couldn't believe I said this out loud. The relationship has to change for us to be able to move forward, and it has to be one of mutual respect. And this was right in the time of my sister and others. And I was just really fortunate to be in an environment where I had people that saw something in me that I wouldn't have otherwise have seen, and really serve as mentor figures. But both in college, and I was a tennis player, so within the tennis team, both players and coaches, and then into my the first part of my career.
And you have extensive education. You've got multiple master's degrees, your doctorate. Was that just a continuous like scholarly career that you just kept on taking classes?
As it happened, there were very few breaks. So I finished my undergraduate degree, and ended up getting a job working in cubicles with a necktie, and under fluorescent green lighting. And it was every cliche about neckties cutting off circulation to the brain are true. And I I did that for 3 months after I graduated, and how I described it is I copped out and went to grad school for the first time, and did that for 18 months and was completely fried with school. I resigned my assistantship, and I ended up going up to the owner of the health club I was working at, and I asked him for a job. And it turns out he was hiring for a membership salesperson. And to me, sell was a 4-letter word. I didn't ever want to go there in my career. And I accepted the job, and that started a 16-year career in the commercial health and fitness industry that was unbelievably rewarding. And one of the things that the owner of the club wanted to do was get out of the day-to-day operations. And so 5 months after I started, I'm promoted to general manager of this club, and I was 24 years old and had no earthly clue what it was to lead and manage effectively. So I picked up my first master's program, and just really, became an immersed student in this, because my team at the time ranged from teenagers who worked in our kids club, taking care of the members' children, to our janitorial crew, which were retired husband and wife in their late 60s. I'm like, how is a 24-year-old person going to relate to them? And right then it taught me that if you think about it, the most rewarding relationships that we have with people really come down to how well we relate to them, and that being the root of relationship. And so I really became immersed in that, knowing that out into the future, maybe I want to get into higher education and teach, and figuring that I'd need a doctorate to do that. So I ended up starting that process. I don't advocate for that for most people, Dave, because the dissertation process is academic hazing. There are hoops that you have to jump through, and the best you can do is make sure that you don't light those on fire as you're going through the process. And so I successfully defended that. Meanwhile, my career in the health and fitness industry is growing. I was a district manager for 11 24-hour fitness locations in Arizona, which was unbelievably rewarding. But my academic credentialing far outpaced even my years of experience at that point. And then so we fast forward, prior to starting, you mentioned earlier, prior to starting my consulting business, I've been at Grand Canyon University in Arizona for 8 years. It's the largest Christian organization or university in the country. And it's been an unbelievable experience getting to work with and among these young people. There truly is something about the energy of young people that keeps you yourself young and energized.
Which master's degree came first, the psychology or the organizational management?
Organizational management came first. The psychology came, the master's of psychology came after I started at GCU. As an employee, we get that benefit. And so I'm thinking, okay, so this might be fun. I'm going back to that sort of voracious appetite for learning, but it served more of a practical purpose. And that is 10 years ago, my daughter's mother was arrested for aggravated DUI on a Monday morning at 11:30. My daughter at the time was 4.5 years old and in the car. Now, my shared parenting plan at the time was I had my daughter every other Thursday through Monday morning, which was conducive to working in a career that required you to work 50, 60 plus hours a week. And then I got wind of the arrest. I got wind that my daughter's mother's blood alcohol level was 0.277. And my plan changed. We like to think that plans are from a straight line A to B, but we know it takes all sorts of different paths along the way. Even you might never get to B, at least what you thought was going to be B. And my plan became going about and getting my kid. And so I'm giving you the snowflake version on the tip of the iceberg. Over the course of a few years, I was able to get primary custody of my daughter, which has just been yet another blessing in my life. Hopefully, it's been a blessing in her life too, to be able to see her and watch her grow into a strong, confident young woman who absolutely knows who she is and has a voice. It's just been it's been remarkable to see the circumstance under which that happened, that led to basically a break in that side of the family for my daughter, and yet her being able to grow through any residual adversity related to that into the person that she is today. It's an unbelievable blessing.
You have another daughter, correct?
We're a blend. My wife and I. So my daughter's 14. My stepdaughter's 12. We're a blend. I actually heard this recently that when people talk about blended families, there's this assumption that it's like throwing fruit into a blender and it blends nice and smooth and everything sort of meshes and marries really, really well. The reality is, blended families, there are some nails that are in that blender. I mean, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but for all intents and purposes, Dave, when my wife and I refer to our kids, they're our kids. We don't refer to them as step anything, except whenever we want to clarify that dynamic with others, and their sisters. Both girls are my daughters. For my wife, same thing.
I want to dig in a little bit to your book. You have this extensive experience, and you came up with this Q.U.E.S.T model. At what point did you start developing that, and when did you complete your book? I'm curious about that because it was published last year, right? In 2021.
Yeah, last November. So, David, as you and I've gotten to know one another, that I'm transparent about being a person of deep faith, and that has really that's really become much deeper and wider over the last 10 years. I'm not a Bible thumping Christian at all. In fact, I'm not strong with scripture, but my relationship to Jesus has never been stronger, and it's largely due to daily prayer and meditation, and really just trying to be open. And up until about 2 or 3 years ago, I always apologized for that. I was never forthcoming with it. I don't believe we should, as Christians, should be in anybody's faces about it. I mean, one of the most off-putting things to most people, especially non-believers, is when they express a curiosity about Christianity or about God or even other religions, and the person answering the question uses it as an opportunity to open up the fire hose on them. And it's fire and brimstone, it's you're a sinner and all that. It's just like, oh my gosh, what about this? What about answering the question that's asked in the hope that you do a good enough job increasing curiosity so you get the next question? And so rather than it being this monologue of how bad you are and why you need this, what about creating a dialogue and an exchange and encouraging this reciprocal exchange? And so so I was at Grand Canyon. I was getting ready to start the semester last year. And at the end of August, I walk into the living room with my wife, and I'm like, I'm feeling a tug. And that's how I describe God trying to get my attention. And it's very much like a tap on the shoulder and this recognition, like, okay, something's coming. It's like, okay, we're going this way now. And it's like, well, how do I know? How do I know where I'm going? And it literally, Dave, it feels in the moment like that's not your problem. I got it. Now, you're going to be tasked with things. I'm going to entrust you with things, and you have to do them well in order to be able to be given more. And so I started Quest Consulting based on that tug, that pull. And a couple of the people that I spoke with initially said that you really need to write a book. And this will be not only personal philosophy, but even business philosophy. And so I outlined the book in September, and I started writing. And as I described it to my wife, it felt like I was talking out of my fingers. It just flowed. It's not an academic text. Because I don't want, because if it was, I would title it The Cure for Insomnia, because that stuff is just generally really, really dry.
Yeah.
And I've done plenty of writing with that, but that wasn't inspiring to me, but it just flowed. And from the end of September, I had it outlined September 27th. I published it November 3rd, 83,000 words in 83 hours. And one of the things that just popped was the Q.U.E.S.T model. Now, how I structured the book, I structured it in two sections where the Q.U.E.S.T, the acronym Q.U.E.S.T, means different things, but the model specifically related to business is, as the acronym goes, quicker, understandable, executable, strategic, and tactics or tactical. And so it really, the design of it is just to demystify any business related things that we have to go do. So we've got some serious decisions that we need to make. And okay, so let's go ahead and make those decisions. And then figure out a way to, how can we, what are those decisions that we can go implement now, right? So that we can do quickly. And then are they understandable? Are those things that we have to do understandable to us? And then can we actually translate that understanding to other people? Because in many cases, they're largely going to be the ones that actually have to execute it. And then is it in fact something that we can execute on? Because the implementation and execution are, I mean, that's the acid test for the decisions that are made. And there's a ton of learning that comes out of when we do it well, whenever it's not done well, or even not done at all. And then how does that fit within the bigger picture of our strategy? So what we're going to go do, and then tactical or how we're going to end up doing it.
Can you talk a little bit about your book and how that model really formulated? You were already doing consulting, right?
I founded Q.U.E.S.T Consulting almost a year ago. So the first part of September of 2021. So the book, the only thing I did prior to that was build out a website. So questconsultingservice.com, and the first iteration of that. And then I started writing the book. So I didn't even think about working with clients or business owners until the first part of this year. Last fall really for me was laying the foundation of why I was doing what I was doing. And that whole purpose driven, as the older I've gotten, for me, everything really comes down to, does it align with my purpose, my personal mission, my reason for being? And if it doesn't align with that, then I just kind of have to move away from it. And so the book was seemingly in perfect alignment with that. And then the next thing after that, became the podcast. And I had never thought about doing a podcast before. And I had a student at the end of fall semester last year said, if you did a podcast, I'd listen every week. I'm like, what an amazing compliment that is.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what it was be about. And I didn't know where I was going to do it. It started in my bedroom closet. I mean, I think that's how most podcasts start, something, humble beginnings. And I do believe that last fall, that really had 5 or 6 months of laying the foundation, matched up with that Q.U.E.S.T model. Figuring it, so I was moving really, really quickly. It was at least understandable to me. And I really was visualizing what that big picture looked like and then how this was going to go. And as we moved into 2022, toward the tail end of January, actually then started working with small business owners, and that has been an unbelievably positive experience. I've got to meet so many wonderful people. I mean, we get jaded when we watch the mainstream media and others because of all of the ugly in the world. And make no mistake, there is plenty of ugly in the world. There's way more good. There's way more good than there is ugly, if we pay attention and take time to actually engage with other people. It's transformative.
Now, are you still teaching at the university?
I am.
And what subjects do you teach?
So I teach in our College of Business. I primarily teach organizational behavior and management. I teach a variety of leadership classes, business communication, managing change, and an introduction to marketing. So a bit of a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah. the managing change, I'm curious about that. So are you teaching graduate level students or?
Primarily undergrads. I do teach in our MBA program. And the leadership class that I teach in our MBA program does touch on managing change some. If any of my faculty counterparts or GCU administrators would listen to what I'm going to say next, they would be displeased, because managing change or change management, whatever nomenclature you want to use, there are some brilliant models that can be applied to this. And I see and understand the application of them. They provide a nice framework, a solid structure for helping people understand the progression of change. There is, however, one thing that can allow us to kind of put those models to the side to get a really, really good understanding of change. And that is, if you, me, or anybody changes anything about our life, we have to want it. Fundamentally, we have to want it. If we don't want it, there's going to be resistance. And in most cases, it doesn't matter what external motivators are thrown at us. If we don't want to, we're not going to. It doesn't, I worked in the health and fitness industry. I don't know how many times I met with people that came in to the health clubs and said, my doctor said I was going to die if I don't do something today. This is why I'm here. And those people lasted 6 weeks. It's because in that moment, they didn't want it more. So you get into pleasure pain. The pain associated with their present state had not yet superseded whatever their pleasure they're deriving from their present state. And only when, in most cases, only when that pain supersedes and becomes more of an oomph than whatever pleasure we're deriving from present state, do we really then want to do it? And once we make the decision, once we have that want to, it's not that change is easy, but it's easier to then push through. And that's where I find the application of the model somewhat limiting, because until a leader or manager figures out what's in it for the person that's going to be affected by the change, until they solve for that, all of these models, they really just don't make much of a difference.
Are you familiar with the book Leading Change by John Cotter?
Yes.
I used some of that book when I was writing the article for Fire Engineering Magazine about culture change in the fire service. And I find that there is that, one side of the coin is leading the change, and then there's managing it.
Mm.
And I think it's pretty much exactly what you're talking about. Like, for you to lead something, lead change, you have to really want it. You have to believe in it. And because if you are the leader of the organization that is, changing its culture, or, sees a need for the change in that culture, if the leader doesn't believe in it and can't show the rest of the organization why it's so important, it's not going to happen.
Agreed. And that's one of the biggest challenges for middle managers. Simon Sinek talks about how things break, and they break in the middle. And a lot of middle managers, they're not taught how to be middle managers, because from my experience, and as a district manager for 24 Hour Fitness, I was by definition a middle manager. And what I learned was the best middle managers have to be umbrellas, because you're getting rained on from above. There's a lot of stress and pressure that you're feeling, and you can't let the people that report directly to you, underneath you within the organizational structure, get soaked, because they're the ones that actually are going to be implementing and executing the decisions that are being made, and you're the conduit to that. And it really is a fascinating psychology when or let's just make it personal. Whenever I disagreed with the decisions that were being made, it's like, wow, that's a fascinating psychology. How do I get behind something that I fundamentally disagree with, knowing that if my team doesn't get behind it, we're gonna fall down? It really becomes this this weird space of, my gosh, am I, in advocating something that I don't agree with, am I being inauthentic? And we talk about authenticity and leadership, and like, am I being inauthentic? And what moments like that caused me to do was really take time and reflect, and like, okay, I want the company to win, and I'm not in those positions to make those decisions yet. And these people are really smart and really well-intended. So I can get behind that. And me being behind that would allow me to demonstrate a level of authenticity, even if I disagree with the details. And that was a way to help me reconcile the internal conflict, and hopefully be able then to transfer enthusiasm, be able to influence and inspire others. That's the leadership piece of it. To have them go chase whatever we're tasked with chasing, while managing the moving parts associated with that put those people in the best position to win. So it really, it's a to your point, if we can't find a way to get behind it, it doesn't much matter.
Yeah.
And it's all psychology, Dave. It really, leadership is fundamentally psychology. I mean, if we think about leaders that are generally, or people that are in leadership positions that are generally less successful, is that one of the things they do is they apply their filter, their worldview, how they do things the same way to each person, rather than saying, no, it's not up to the individual employees or team members to flex their style to fit the leader. It's the opposite. It requires the leader to flex their style and meet their follower where they are, because leadership doesn't exist without willing followership.
Right.
And if we want to assess the strength of anyone's leadership, all we have to do is look at how many willing followers that they have. And I'm not talking about people that simply check the box to keep that person off their back. I'm talking about people that want to do it because Dave asked me to do it. So it completely transcends the logo. It transcends the brand, transcends the company. I mean, let's face it, we make companies and organizations and businesses out to be this nebulous third-party entity, when in reality, none of it exists without the people comprising it. And so it's just like, okay, well, what's the recipe for gaining willing followers? Now, to say it out loud is really simple, but to do it is extraordinarily difficult. It's like, okay, well, if I can get to know someone and invest time with them, and once they believe that I have their best interest in mind, they'll start to trust me. And that takes time. Once they start to trust me, then they'll commit. Trust always precedes commitment. Believing that someone has your best interest in mind precedes trust. And this goes in any relationship. And once they commit to us. They commit to the leader. And it's extraordinarily difficult to do, because how many relationships have any of us been in where we had trust and one thing happened and trust was eroded? It took all this time to build this, and in one moment, it can be gone.
I can see where your student was justified in encouraging you to be a podcast host.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
No, man, do you teach online?
I don't. I teach on ground. I teach on ground. I have taught online. Teaching is not the right word, unless it's a synchronous type of scenario like you and I are doing. Asynchronous instruction is really more facilitation rather than actual teaching, because the students are either having to read and respond to written word or watch a video or whatever. So you lose a lot of the interaction. And coming out of 2020, I know for me personally, and then the students I asked, there is absolutely something so powerful about the in-person classroom experience. I mean, physical proximity. I mean, the number one predictor of love is physical proximity. And so we are social animals. I mean, that's been long established. So being in the classroom and being able to engage and look people in the eye and genuinely care about them. And, one of the things this just popped into my head. My wife is getting ready to interview for a promotion. And when that opportunity presented itself, she was a little bit nervous because she's on a well-established team that she leads. I mean, this thing is working really, really well. And she's like, I don't know if I want to give that up. And I said something to her that I never said before in my life, Dave. And that was, well, if you get this opportunity, you get to love more people. And right then, right then, she's like, I'm going for it. I think she interviews this week, so we'll see how that goes. But we we have such an opportunity in whether it's through podcasts, whether it's through, I know you're a public speaker. You've gone around you chatted with a variety of different groups. I get to be in front of Generation Z, hundreds and hundreds of young people every year. And it's just like, my gosh, what a blessing to be able to love them and have more people to be able to love. And there's exactly nothing wrong with any of that. And so I'm at a place in life where it's better than it's ever been. And I'm not talking about the measurable standards that society defines for us. I don't care much about that anymore. It really is this sense of peace, being comfortable in your own skin, and just like, you know what, I'm done with the chaos. I'm done with the drama. All I want to do is be a better version of me, so I can be a better version of those people that come into my world. Because I don't know if I'm going to change the world, but I know I can be influential in the people that come into my world, and maybe that helps change theirs, for the better.
There have been instances when I've been approached by people that I was leading. I moved up through the ranks in the fire service, ultimately becoming a battalion chief, where I managed 6 fire stations in a really busy part of town. And there's, when you're working a 24-hour shift and you got, 6 to 12 people living and sleeping and eating together, and sometimes, you don't know them, you don't like them, they might be a jerk, but you got to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
When you get into a position of authority where you're managing all these different personalities, it can be difficult if a subordinate pushes back against you,
Mm-hmm.
and what you're and what you're directing them to do. So I had been approached by several mid-level managers. So it'd be company officers. They're managing a fire station, and the crew assigned there. So they'd ask me how I managed to correct behaviors that I didn't like in a way that the people receiving the feedback from me knew I was serious, but would do it and do it without feeling like they were being punished.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a little while to be able to articulate it, but this is where I ended up. Imagine you have all of your children, all these people that are working for you are your children. You want them to succeed. When they mess up, you want to hold them accountable so they don't make the same mistake again. But you're doing it not as punishment. You're holding them accountable so that they succeed, because you care about them, because you love them.
That's
and
right.
Whether you like their behavior or not, it doesn't matter,
That's right.
because you love them. And you have to find a way to genuinely care about the people you're leading, even the ones that you don't like too much.
Yeah. There's a lot in there. There's a lot in there. As a parent, and I happen to think lazy managers, and when I say lazy, I mean mindset, when they defer to managing others as glorified babysitting, I think that's just a lazy mindset.
Yes.
But there are parallels to parenting and leading and managing others. And as a parent, this as a parent that you're not raising kids, you're raising adults.
Right.
And the accountability, you're able to do that up to discipline and punishment. You're able to do that with your kids if for no other reason they're financially dependent on you. I mean, let's face it, once that ends, the relationship is no longer involuntary. I mean, we're born into an involuntary environment. And once that last piece is done, this is why relationships to me are an incredible compliment. I mean, when my wife said yes, and she said, I do, what an amazing compliment she just paid me. We don't talk about it like that. What an amazing compliment it was for you and I to connect and agree to be on each other's podcast. I mean, it's a compliment. What an amazing compliment for our kids whenever they don't have to have a relationship with us anymore, not technically, and yet they still do after they're no longer financially dependent on us. What an amazing compliment. And so in business, our employees, that's a voluntary relationship. They can leave whenever, right? You can leave whenever. You might have to fire someone, and I mean that's no good. But what I found effective when it comes to accountability is like, how do I earn the right to hold you accountable? Well, if you think about when people get into arguments, and you can say, well, what are you arguing over? And it's like, well, we have differences of opinion. And I'm like, okay, so I internalize that makes sense to me. But what if you and I just hypothetically were in an argument and we were debating, I mean, it wasn't personal attack, but we were literally legitimately debating the merit of the issue, and we just fundamentally disagreed, but the intensity of that increased. People would see a difference of opinion, but what if I believe what it is that I'm telling you? And what if you believe what it is you're telling me? Well, in that moment, we have competing truths. It's the truth as I see it. It's the truth as you see it. It's not differences of opinion. It's competing truths. And so when you look at it this way, it's like, now how does that apply to accountability? It's like, okay, employee X or team member Y, I want you to walk me through how you intend to do this. I'm going to empower you to do this. I'm going to trust you to go do this. I want you to tell me what it is you're going to do and what the expected outcome is. I'm not going to assign it. I can, because by virtue of positional authority, I can do that, but that doesn't transfer ownership to that person. So I want to transfer ownership, and I want to hear it from them, because if there is then a miss, then I can start digging in to understand the miss. And then the conversation becomes, well, Dave, you told me. And it's not you're not internalizing it as my opinion. I'm giving your truth back to you. And then if we've built the relationship well enough, above and beyond personality differences, above and beyond not liking certain behaviors or whatever, where we've spent enough time and they genuinely believe we have their best interest in mind, then they understand why we're holding them accountable. It's not to punish them, it's to make them better. It's to help prepare them for the next moment, the next relationship, the next promotion. That's the design. And I honestly think as leaders, we're not transparent enough with our intentions on a topic like that. It's like, this is why I'm doing it. This is my motivation and intent. If certain parts of this don't work for you, that's okay. Tell me, and I'll flex to meet you where you are. And then we're going to go, we'll do this thing together.
I believe this is extremely valuable, and it doesn't matter if you're in the fire service, the military, in a corporate setting. Like, this is all applicable information. It goes back to effective leadership, the emotional intelligence aspect. You have to care about your people
Yeah.
and really strive to ensure their success. And to your point about uh, the piece of, you have to be effective at communicating in order to build that trust, in order to build the relationship. You've got to get to know them, and you can't have a commitment from your team until they trust you. And I just love how all the pieces came together in this conversation. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me and sharing so much of your wisdom. And for those listening that want to purchase your book or enlist your services, follow you on social media, where's the best place for people to connect with you?
You certainly can check out my website, questconsultingservice.com. It's service singular. The logo is quite unique. You can see it's this Q in thing, and not to get conspiratorial with QAnon or anything like that. It's just the one I picked. Certainly on LinkedIn. And I don't do I don't do a lot with social media. It's mainly LinkedIn, some Facebook, but emails at questconsultingservice.com. And if you're a small business owner, or that needs help scaling, or even if you just have an idea about starting a business, and from business planning on through to larger organizations that really want to train the existing generation of managers to become better leaders, or even thinking more downstream, helping the next generation of people become more effective leaders. That's the thing that blows my hair back. It absolutely blows my hair back, because Dave, as you know, leadership, we can put words to it. We can talk about influence and inspire and all of it, but when done well, it's just like, it's that it factor that, like, we see it when we know it's happening, we can see it, but then it's just like, well, what is that it? And it's like, you can touch it. It's like trying to drink coffee with a fork. I mean, you can touch it, but it's just hard to grab. And it starts first with a willingness and a want to care genuinely about other people, because you value that yourself. And if you are in a position of authority and you don't genuinely value, or you just, that want and desire to care for other people, that doesn't mean you are, let me think how I want to say this. That doesn't necessarily mean you are cut out for being a quote leader. It's just, and that's okay. We all have different roles to play. But because when done well, it requires a lot of energy, effort, and really giving to the people that ultimately will willingly follow us.
Dr. Slover, Ed, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope you have an amazing day.
Thanks for having me, Dave. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of From Embers to Excellence. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on your favorite podcast platform, and visit hollenbachleadership.com for additional content. My goal is, and always will be, to add value to as many people as possible. So if I can be of any assistance to you or someone you know, please connect with me via email or on one of my social media accounts, linked on the homepage of my website. Remember, our failures don't define us unless we let them, and the only true measure of a leader is the success of their team.